Okay, now that's settled. 3, 2, 1. So it's two things generally on our side. The first thing that you should know in terms of clarity, if someone is struggling to understand what these two concepts means, is simply on one side, that is the side we are defending. The earth is special, and that's why we are here, which means that we are also special. Second thing you should know for the other side is that habitable planets, the Earth included, go through forms of filtering, and that forms of filtering stop certain people from getting to certain planets at some point in time, such that there's a rarity in terms of species that are able to make through some of these stages. What it means is, even for those who exist now, if there's some form of filtering, we are in trouble. The debate then says, assuming either is conclusively true, I think what it means is that there's no other evidence that this is false. Which one would we prefer? And that's how OG enters the debate. We will prove to you two things large. One, why life is pain. Secondly, why pain is less. First thing then, why is life pain for every alien species? There's always going to be a lot of scarcity. There are two reasons we give you on OG. One, because of the law of conservation of energy, it means the spectrum we are working with itself is very limited and cyclical. Two, all life forms depend on this energy to survive. Three, life forms through things like reproduction always increase, but the energy is still rotating. What it means then is scarcity makes it very difficult for access to happen. B, this scarcity is always competitive as well for two reasons. One, because non-competitive forms die out because one, they are not safe enough to do things like stockpiling food or access these things in the first place. Two, they do not have security. So even if they get it, it is always taken from them. Three, what it means for even those who are able to access it means that those who are able to access more food, more resources, more energy based off of a long period of time, come stronger and gain more intelligence. This gives them more destructive capabilities. Even if they are good incentives, they are stronger and they can destroy. What it means is this: for people who are gaining intelligence, and this intelligence is compounding. It means that for intelligent people, you could say trick a cow and get it to sleep for you and you eat it afterwards. What happens then is that you would always be the alien form will always be subservient to you. And even if they wanted to fight back, they would not be able to. Because this intelligence, like I said, is compounding over time through things like collaboration. It means that over time, there will be no defense for subservient bodies. Thirdly, once these societies are built, it's very impossible to stop being competitive. Why? One, because power is gained and there's things like unionization, people will have to keep fighting to keep themselves in that specific environment. Two, if you are intelligent, you would want to use that competitiveness because even if you're a good person and only want to make the world better, in the short term, you will need resources to maintain yourself and also help the world and stop those who want to stop power. So, for example, even if you think that Hitler was probably a bad guy trying to take over the world, to beat him, you still need to take huge amounts of control on resources to stop him. What it means then is this: competition is inherent in life forms. What then does this mean for the great filter? One, we should assume in terms of framing that the filter needs to be inherent to extraterrestrial civilization. It cannot be a coincidence then that these civilizations failed before they can travel through space. The most reasonable interpretation is that the technology needed to travel through space causes the civilization to fail. What what then does this look like? It means these people have to go through things like global warming, nuclear wars, bioplagues that cause diseases and stuff like that, and resource conflicts because of that scarcity that I had first told you about. What it means then is life becomes far more difficult for all who want to exist. Why is life pain then for the organisms anyway? One, it's pain because the intensity of pain on net is higher than happiness. You cannot fully enjoy pain, and in the end, you will die a sad death. Because even if you got used to pain from bleeding, for example, you forget you are bleeding at some point and still bleed out. Two, in order to succeed competitively, you need to focus on pain. Why? Because competition inherently involves being self-critical, being critical of others, which means everybody focuses on their faults and their incapacities. This makes it difficult for them to have an overall quality of life. It means that you can never be happy with what you have, because even if you have something, you worry about protecting it and how long it can last. Thirdly, you cannot be happy because you keep comparing yourself to others. It means nothing is ever enough for you. Fourth, in competitive societies, inequality is inherent to them because one, that's a great way to maintain power if you strip others of it, especially as the power is limited. Most people are poor, most people are weak. Living standards may improve, but they might be on the bottom. There is constant paranoia on the side where the great filter exists. You cannot opt out in many instances. There is suicide, biology stops you, stigma, pain, connections, and stuff like that. What is the conclusion then on Gov? Two things. One, we avoid the opposition situation when there are lots of civilizations that keep existing. They fight among themselves, live very painful life, and die. On our side, there is one civilization that is constantly improving and will get better. The OG case is not then that there is no pain on our side. We say that one, there is far less competition. What it means then is there is an easier way to make life better overall, and two, there is far less paranoia, even on those who make it through the filter, because on our side, they know they are there forever. Proud OG.
So hello everyone, Kshitiz Jain, going as leader of opposition. Um, yep. So just before I start my speech, it's my first final, and I've seen a lot of seniors do this. So I just felt that it was right to do this. Just want to thank my seniors as well, whether Mehul, Nitya, who started like literally teaching us debating, Arshi, Pranjal. Thank you so much, guys. Also, the people I started debating with, especially Gunveer, who's still with me right now. So thank you so much, guys, all because of you. So yeah, starting my speech, starting my speech in three, two, one. Panel, I think the most important push that we get from side government today was that according to this great filter hypothesis, if that is proven, that people are going to looking at an idea of an impending death, wherein they just feel sad about the fact that at one point of time the earth is going to end. Okay. At that point of time, they say that they're going to lose that will to live and to make an effort. And at that point of time, there's going to be a lot of pain for this person, when he's waiting for his death. I'll engage with that towards the end of the debate. But the most important metric that I was able to establish from it, that they understand the threat of climate change and asteroids. We need to understand that this is the most important deadlock in the debate, that the threat of climate change and asteroids is symmetric on both sides of the house, whether rare earth hypothesis is proven or whether great filter hypothesis is proven. Because climate change and asteroid is when at that point of time when these things are symmetric in nature, this is the most important deadlock in the debate. And I believe that whichever side is able to better cater to this deadlock, I believe that side is able to take this debate. But let us before we go into that, I believe let us first important to understand that what is the status quo then look like. I think status quo today is literally doesn't give two shits about environment. The status quo doesn't is not making active efforts to try to understand the environment and try to curb the problems such as global warming, water pollution, air pollution, and atmospheric depletion. At that point in time, the reasons for this become twofold. First of all, lack of proximity. Because if I'm a person, living in underprivileged community, living in underprivileged communities or economically marginalized, I literally do not have food on my table, and so I'm not literally likely to care about supposedly environmental changes. Or if I or maybe I'm just not aware about it. At a point in time, that is true. I fail to understand that how these people would no POIs right now after the fourth or the fifth minute. So at a point in time, that is true. I still can't understand that when the status quo has a lot of these problems, these people when they have that lack of proximity, why would they care about the environment? Second important problem with the status quo, that the people and government today, they have certain people and government today, they have capacity to give a shit about environment. They have the money, they have the resources, but they simply do not choose to engage in that because a lot of different reasons, that their own personal reasons, they want to make profit because of the capitalistic instinct. But at the point in time that all of these problems, the status quo is true. Third important characterization then. What happens, that what about this extraterrestrial life is so important? I believe extraterrestrial life is a matter of interest to millions and billions of people on the earth. Everyone wants to know that whether life exists outside, how do we come into existence, and how this going to be and how it everything works out. At a point in time, that is true, and this becomes a major talking point for all the people in the whole world. When that happens, when it is such a big major talking point, I believe that when either of these hypotheses are true, are proven true, this hypothesis is going to a large number of people, and the scale of impact then becomes much higher. But then what exclusive does side opposition bring today? I believe when this idea of great filter hypothesis is proven true, so when humans on Earth understand that species on other planets aren't able to survive because of geographical crisis and problems, and how these become the very reason for that life on their planet do not exist anymore. The simple idea becomes that these people realize, first of all, that Earth is not at all unique, because they understand that life did exist on other planets, and our planet was not the only was not the only planet. But second important point, that they understand, it literally makes people value the Earth, because they now see the value of Earth, that how lucky we are, that that even that we have not destroyed, and they understand that they still have time. At a point in time, that is true. This literally makes people give a fuck about the environment, because as I stated earlier, that a large number of people are literally going to engage with this idea, or they're going to engage with this thought of that how does Earth exist, when they understand that how lucky we are, and how our life on other planets literally was destroyed because of the shitty things that we are doing currently, and at one point in time that is going to happen to that may happen to us. This literally gives incentives for the government and to people, which in the current status quo is not using its capacity to actively make efforts to fix the environment. At a point in time that becomes true. I believe that government government side opposition today is better able to cater to the idea, or better able to cater to the deadlock, that how we're able to counter this threat of climate change, because we need to understand this as environmental crisis and asteroids are really near. Climate change can actually end the Earth. And secondly, asteroids. So asteroids can also lead to the end of the world. So it's basically creates an idea of incentivizing these people, incentivizing governments to make efforts for research and development. So we can even we can protect us against environmental change. We can protect ourselves against asteroids using I don't know, weaponized shit in space, etc. But then at that point of time, the exclusive benefit on our side becomes, as opposed to side government, that we still have that delta of change on our side, that we still have that have that ability to push people to bring the change. But let us then engage with their side, that what happened, what does the world look like when their Earth hypothesis is proven to. I believe when the idea spreads that Earth is the only unique combination that which was able to survive in this whole universe, people get a sense of invincibility, that wow, I'm so cool, I'm so important, that my planet is literally the only one that is able to survive on a world. At a point in time that is true, these people start to understand that how important I am. These people start to understand how important I am. But at the same time, it also gives these people a sense of invincibility, that that idea of humanity ending seems so much unreal to these people, because now they believe how important we are and how invincible we are, that we are the only ones able to survive on this world. So therefore, we would never be able to end Earth. At that point of time, this ideology that inculcates into the people because of this rare Earth hypothesis being true, I believe that becomes extremely problematic. But but only on the idea of scale of impact, I believe that we are able to take this debate literally on the scale of impact, because at the point in time we proved to you that how lots of people are going to engage with this idea of engage with this idea of great filter hypothesis. A lot of people are going to engage engage with it at a point, and even even if literally even if no, I'm not saying that billions and billions of people are literally easily going to engage with it, because since this is still extremely difficult to reach information in the remote areas. But even if governments and world governments and major powers are able to wake up, then that is literally a delta of change on our side. But let's engage with opposition's case in the last 15 seconds. They say that how I started explaining in my speech that how these people would be sad because of their impending doom. I fail to understand that because the problem then becomes on our the benefit on our side then becomes that these people still have the incentive to care about the earth, and they would want to exceed the time on earth because they want to live longer. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for exceeding my time. Thank you so much.
If Elo is correct, we win. Because if climate change happens and all humans die on our side, that's fine because there's less people who live and experience pain. So unless they beat the case, we prove about why most life is pain, they're already out of this debate. But second, I think it's really obvious to everyone in this debate that Elo is gotten the motion backwards for some reason. Because if you are the only Earth and the only living life form in the planet or whatever, there is no escaping climate change. If you fuck up your planet, there's no alternatives for you. You can't leave the Earth and find another planet and then colonize it. At that point, you don't have any other life forms elsewhere. But you know what? Even if there is other life forms, you know what the great filter tells you? It tells you that climate change is what stops us from developing at all. So the great filter tells you that most civilizations elsewhere failed eventually because they wanted to travel to space. And that probably required only two things which we know for certain: technology and energy. And now we know that as these civilizations became more and more advanced in their technology and energy, they got wiped out. This is a very good messaging tactic for campaigns about climate change that can tell you, hey, other fucking planets got destroyed trying to go to space. Let's stop trying to be overly advanced and trying to make like our civilization super cool. Let's try to make our civilization actually work. Okay. So, the great filter thing doesn't really work. I think the rare earth one does. Okay. So why exactly are we winning? First, let's explain how we win on the metric of pain. The most certain thing in this debate is that life is pain. The mechanisms that my PM gave you are going to be you need to defeat those mechs, not just give a random alternative. So if people come up here and say, the sunset looks really nice, or we can be religious, or we detest pain, so we try to avoid it, none of these work until you explain why your body allows you to do so. These are the 6 mechanisms you have to beat. First, pain is more intense because you need to keep feeling pain in order to avoid that benefit. Happiness needs to go away for you to continue pursuing more meaningful things. Second, pain makes you succeed in a competitive society. You need to be criticized by others in order to become better. Third, pain means that you can't be happy because you need to keep comparing yourself to others, even if they don't criticize you. Fourth, in competitive societies, inequality is inherent within them, which means that as people become powerful, the majority of people have resources taken away from them, which means the majority of people don't feel happy because they're not as good as the people at the top. And fifth of all, there's constant paranoia in people's lives because we don't know when we lose our jobs or when things will go wrong in the future, which is an evolutionary leftover, because if we didn't have paranoia about the future, we wouldn't plan for it, which would make us weaker than others. And sixthly, there is no opt-out. Most people in their everyday lives do have suicidal thoughts at some point in their life. It's really uncomfortable to talk about, but pretty much everyone does. The problem is we can't act on them. It's terrifying. You feel pain. Your biology just shocks you. You freeze in place. There's stigma against it. There's literally laws against people doing this because of how much we are scared of death as a society. So we don't have an opt-out. This is why life is pain. Simply, this means we win the debate. First, empirically, we've shown you this most certain thing. And second, you cannot have biologies that don't feel pain in opposition because of all the reasons we gave, where those biologies would not survive and would not succeed. This means 3 things in terms of preemptive winning. First, even if opposition says humans will die out, that's fine. We win the debate, there's less life. Second, if opposition says, if you don't believe humans live a life of pain, then you cannot deny that the other people who they live over do live a life of pain. Like factory farmed animals born into coops, never seeing sunlight, separated from their family, and have all of their restrictions and freedoms taken away from them so they can be efficiently made into meat that you can eat. These people often give you more energy to the life forms, which means that it's not a speculative claim. In order to be a successful life form, you need to rule over others. That's why there's more pain. Even if the humans were happy, the vast majority of people on Earth aren't. Third of all, even if Op says there are more humans in the future, so technically this debate is relevant because, there's going to be infinite humans on our side if we survive and infinite life forms on their side. This is bizarre. Stars will eventually die out, and so will the universe have black holes eat it up. These are big numbers. These might be 50 Googleplex people instead of 500,000 Googleplex people, and that might not be be easy for you to conceive as a judge. It doesn't matter. It's still important for the fucking life form themselves. It's still intense pain that they feel through their everyday lives. And so we win if we have less people, and that's simply there, and we win. Why is utility the most important metric? Because it's universal to every human and every creature. It's the most clear thing that is certain in this debate. But second, it's the most inherent part of all of our morality. We don't make decisions between two different rule sets in our life without considering how it affects people on their happiness and pain. So you might believe the right to property. You might also believe people shouldn't be starving to death. So if someone robs someone on the street, you will only give that person moral consideration if that person has so much pain that it justified the slight lack of pain, sorry, lack of happiness you take away when you steal from someone else. This is how our morality comes about. And finally, our rules have changed immensely over time. We can't trust our duties. In the past, we used to think slavery is okay. We used to think things like women don't get rights. But the thing we've constantly believed is that people should get happiness. We always had this belief as the most consistent thing that we should weigh this debate on. And so taking that away from lots of other life forms, forcing them to live through painful lives is enough to win. Second, why technology cannot exist on side opposition, and the comparative as to why we're better. Sure, CEO, quickly.
Cool. So how does a hypothesis being true go ahead and intensify pain? Could you please give us mech?
Bestie, in your world, there are more people. In our world, there are less people. That's the point. Okay, so why is the comparative better on our side? First, opposition has to concede to this frame. They have a world where technology cannot develop. This is the only way the great filter makes sense. Every civilization dying out before they explore space can't just be a coincidence. They can't all die because of asteroids randomly. That means that as you get better and get more technology as a civilization, you collapse. This can't be the civilization deciding not to have technology because of all the reasons we gave, that competition forces people to become more advanced. The only logical conclusion then is that this technology is misused. So until off beats the competitive analysis we gave, the most realistic belief you can have on side opposition is that all of these civilizations wipe each other out through things like nuclear war, through things like climate change, through things like resource scarcity and people not having food to eat or being poor. I'm going to pause the timer. Arya, pause yourself. You're not muted.
I'm so sorry. Observer, I'm incredibly sorry about that. Observer, please mute yourselves. This is a grand finals debate. It's being recorded. Thank you.
I
I'm
paused my
incredibly
timer
sorry
at 1
about
minute,
that.
10 seconds. Is that the same for you guys?
For me, it was 5:57. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sure. 1 minute, 5 seconds is fine by me. Okay. I'll continue in 3, 2, 1. The implication of this is that they don't get complex technology. The reason for this is they can't just have good technology without having bad technology, because technology has multiple uses. Something that heals someone can also be reverse engineered to hurt them. Any technology that makes a process more efficient can be weaponized to control resources, and that can be used to control other people, right? So if the competitive incentive stays, then that means that technology is always used to harm people on side opposition. This means there's a 0% chance of getting rid of pain, because we need technology to change our biological processes, to change the way we think, and to make us not need to live in a world of pain. That means that we fix this only on our side. First, we can stop eating other life forms because we get other non-biological resources that can replace biological ones. If other planets don't have life, they have minerals, which become more cheap than animals, which makes it cheaper for you to simply make synthetic meat or to create clone farm animals which don't feel pain, for example, because that's cheaper and more efficient. That immediately wins the debate just on utility. Second, we have a chance of solving all the pain that humans go through in their everyday life, which op doesn't, because our technology doesn't kill us off. That by itself is enough. If we have a 3% chance of making life less painful or even happy, then we beat opposition. Third, we get more land, and land that gives you resources. So the more evolved we get, the more we need to stop thinking about things like scarcity. Look at countries like continents like Africa and India. People fight over food because that's the most important thing to them. Look at other developed nations like Europe and America. They fight over things like their pronouns or things like how they feel about women. That is because you can only think about the everyday life and the actual happiness you feel in it when you don't need to think about the next meal and whether you can pay off rent. Clearly, opening government.
Hi, Gunveer going for Dira for today. But before I begin, just again, very quick shout out to my debating partner Kshitiz, as well as my seniors for making this all happen, right? Cool. Pronouns he, him. I'll take POIs after the 4th minute. I'll also verbally ask for them, but again, no promises because I don't want OG to get even more upset than they already are. Right. Cool. With that, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, 2 major pushes from OG today. Firstly, on the grounds of technology, because they think that the great filter being proven true would lead to people stop inventing in technology because they'll understand that this is what leads to their demise. But secondly, on the principle of what people should be happy, and therefore it is the only paradigm where they can be happy, which is theirs. Cool. I'll get to the second one later, but firstly to the first point, right, about technology. I've read the context multiple times. Nowhere does it state that these extraterrestrial life forms died before they could reach space, right? But even if that is the argument that OG is running with and will give them that benefit of the doubt, let's understand even within their framing why they're bad. Because firstly, and most importantly, if these other life forms died because of geological changes or asteroid clashes, the first thing that probably comes to the mind of humans is not the fact that technology is bad, it's the fact that technology can be a saving grace. Because if you're the only civilization who's been able to reach space, it also means we're more technologically advanced, which means it's our incentive to make sure that we're able to counter this environmental crisis, which is currently ongoing across the country, right? Which looks like develop more renewable forms of energy, which can probably harm the environment the least, right? And also work towards making sure that the current harm is also could be redone. Secondly, on the point of asteroid collision in the sense, right? At the same time, if you understand if you're the most advanced species because you're the only ones who've been able to make it to space, you also understand we're probably the only ones who could counter it, which looks like developing technology to counter or give Earth a defense against asteroid clashes and shit, right? But at the very least, it's something which gives the governments and people across the globe an incentive to actively participate into it, which means that it's still something we're doing as compared to that paradigm where all of this is abandoned completely because we don't think that this is how the Earth will end. But secondly, panel, and this is extremely important, right? Because I think the characterization that Kshitiz gives in his first speech about what is the current perception to climate change and asteroid, etc., it remains constant, and that's both unchallenged. It means that in this current status quo, climate change isn't considered as big of a deal, which means that in this world panel, in Gov's paradigm, when you're absolutely told that you're invincible, your first thought process would be that I'm just unique, and therefore climate change, if it couldn't it can't harm me because I'm the special one, I'm the chosen Earth, because again, I was the only Earth where life could be sustained, right? Just let me draw a simple parallel for you, a basic example. If I live the life of a chain smoker, I understand that I could die from lung cancer because it's a threat, it's written on the package quite literally. But at the same time, if I see my partner, who's also a chain smoker, die the next day from lung cancer, my ideology would shift completely because I understand that lung cancer is an even more real threat than I earlier thought it would be. I knew it was a possibility in the first place, but now I've seen it happen to someone who's close to me. I've seen it happen to someone who's just like me. So therefore, I know that I can also die from lung cancer, which means that from the very next day, my first step in life would be to start to try to quit smoking because I see it as a real threat, right? Because I've seen it happen to someone who's just like me, and I don't want that to happen to myself because I don't want to die, right? Even though I knew that lung cancer possibility in the first place, I take it more seriously now because I've seen it happen to someone who's just like me, and therefore the idea is similar here, panel. If I see climate change take out, I know for a fact climate change has taken out other life forms across the universe, across the galaxy. I know it can take me out as well. Therefore, I will take it seriously. I will invest in it. And if people start to believe in this, because this idea becomes widespread, because extraterrestrial life is like a topic of global interest, as Kshitiz tells you, it also means that people also have to put pressure on the governments if they don't react to it automatically, but they will, because even they will see it as a threat, because no one wants to die, right? So that is the general theme of this idea, because that is also what I think Gov is trying to run away with, which is that people won't be happy because they know they'll die, right? And this was the second push, which I'm coming to, right? Understand, panel, there's a difference between happiness and delusion, and this difference is important, right? In that paradigm, the idea is that, and Kshitiz also tells you this, but they never engage with it. The idea is that the ability for the Earth to die from climate change or asteroid clashes remains the same in both paradigms, which is that even if in that paradigm they prove that other planets didn't die from climate change, it doesn't do anything for the fact, or context even mentions it, that the climate change on Earth will also not take Earth out, which means that the threat of it remains constant in both paradigms. But what is the difference then? The difference is that in their paradigm, they don't see it as an even less of a threat, or at the very least, they're unbothered by this, or it doesn't affect their reaction to climate change in the first place, because they don't think they're related and they don't think that is what will lead to the end of human life, right? But in our paradigm, why does that change? People understand that this is what is probably going to happen to me, and which is why I have to deal with this ASAP, which means that I have to put all my make sure that I'm able to put to this. But secondly, on the point that if I know that impending death is coming, I will always be sad. Understand, man, that even a 5-year-old kid knows that they're going to die someday. But does that mean they stop living? Does that mean they kill themselves the very next day? No, right? Because they understand that's the purpose of life, right? You try to prolong your life as much as possible. So even if I know that there's a chance I'm going to die, it does not mean that I'm probably going to shoot myself tomorrow, because why just not get done with it, right? Because I understand that that's what the purpose of life is, which means that even if we as a human race understand that we're probably going to end up one day just like other planets, it doesn't mean that I'm probably going to stop caring about it altogether. If anything, I'm going to probably start to make sure that impending doom is stretched out to as much as possible, which will be done by investing heavily into technology in terms of understanding of fighting climate change, in terms of making sure that another COVID-19 doesn't happen, in terms of making sure that these diseases are also counted better. And all of this will prove to the fact that I want to live, right? If the will to live is something which metric in this debate understands far greater in our paradigm, because I'm actively fighting to make sure that this idea of the lifespan of my life is extended as much as possible, right? Even if I know that at the end of the day I'm going to die, I still want that day to be as farther down the line as possible. And that's what like worlds across, like that's what every single country would fight for. That's what every single person would fight for, which is why the idea.
Yellow, I'm
is to
sorry
stop
to
caring.
interrupt. The chair got disconnected. I'm really sorry. Snigdha got disconnected. She's rejoining.
Cool.
I'm so sorry about that. I've rejoined. So I
worries.
lost about a minute of your speech. I think the last thing that I heard you say clearly, because like I had terrible network issues, was you
I'm so sorry,
mechanizing
Semba,
why
your
people.
voice is breaking a little. What was the last thing you heard me say?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're audible.
Great. I think the last thing I heard you say was mechanizing why people will now take this seriously, because this is the kind of pain that pushes people through. I think this was I have you left at 3:30. Yeah.
3:30. Well, just 2 minutes back then.
Yes. Like just I entered soon, so I have the last 25 seconds. But I'm really sorry.
No worries. That's fine. Could you just like rework the timer to 3:25?
Sure.
Or do you want
Okay.
like other artists to like keep you in the loop about what happened, or like, whatever alternative there is? I'm okay with that.
Yeah. What we could do is we could run the stopwatch continuing from what we have, but we just calculate and give you one
9
minute
minutes
more.
or so, I think.
Yeah, 1 minute more.
No, but like
8:39.
but if you like left the meter 3:30 and it's 5:25
30.
right now, it's 2 minutes, right?
1 minute 30 seconds, because I have your last 25 seconds. Yeah.
Perfect. Good.
Yeah.
So then I have time till 8:45, I think.
Yes, you do.
Perfect, that works then. Cool. So starting my speech, just to like make sure the last thing you heard at the 3:30 mark was about just like me starting to mechanize as to why people would now see it as a threat and like cope up with life, etc., right?
Perfect. Yes.
Sure, works. Again, understand panel, and like OG wants you to believe that just because people now suddenly find out they're going to die at a certain point of time, this now suddenly lose the will to live, which means that they'll be sad all the time, they'll do me all the time, because they know that they're going to die only one fucking day, right? But understand why this is very unlikely to happen, right? Even a 5-year-old child knows that they're probably going to die one day, right? But that does not mean that they lose the will to live, right? Because they know that this is what like life is essentially all about, which means that they probably like still go ahead and extend live life like they want to live it to, right? But secondly, and more importantly, they also like, try to prolong their life as much as possible. Just because I know I'm going to die one day does not mean I wake up next day and decide to kill myself, because I know that I'm going to die, so why not just get done with it, right? Which means that this idea that OG tries to push on us, that people will just lose the will to live and be sad and gloomy all the time, doesn't stand in the first place. Because why is that going to happen when we already live in a world but death is something which is expected, which is finalistic, right? Which means that if I already know it's happening, the only aim in like my life as a person today is to like make sure that I enjoy my life as much as possible, and at the same time also to prolong my life as much as possible, which means that I'm probably like going to take care of my health and stuff because I understand I want to prolong it. Which means the similar logic also applies to what the people of Earth, like countries like across the globe, are probably going to do when they find out that other planets, much like them, also perished in a similar manner. Which means that they now recognize that climate change, diseases, or like just basic like biodiseases, or just asteroid collisions in general, are a real threat. Which means that they understand that this is how other planets like life forms ended, and therefore I have to make sure this isn't the fate that I end up with, right? But even if I know that it's probably the fate I'm going to end up with, that does not mean that I stop caring about it at all, because I understand the importance of making sure that I prolong it as much as possible. Therefore, investment into like technology which fights climate change, investment into technology which probably like fights asteroid collisions is drastically more. Before that, a POI, preferably from CO or CG. 3, 2, 1. All right. Seeing the POIs, moving further. Right?
POI.
Sure.
Do you think guilt always translates into action?
Cool. All right, help me understand this. I don't understand what guilt factors into it, right? It's simply a case where I understand that other people have gone through this as well, which means that I see myself in their position. But I also understand that at this point of time, I have more time, which means that I understand that in this life, I understand that I still have more time to deal with these issues. Therefore, I'm probably going to focus a lot more on them to make sure that these issues like don't end up causing like what lead to my demise, right? Which means, panel, it's quite clear, and what is the metric in this debate? It's that if the probability of Earth ending by climate change or any of these factors remains constant in both paradigms, the metric is quite easily in which paradigm is it quite possible that Earth like, takes it more seriously, the people of Earth, countries across the globe, right? And if that is the parameter by which we're judging this debate, I think we take this debate absolutely out of OG's hands, because it's quite easy to understand. Because it's quite easy to understand that in that regard, what's probably going to happen is that if I find out I'm the one like chosen planet, I'm probably not going to care about any of these issues, because if like I was the gifted one, which means that I was probably like meant to like outlive all of this, and therefore I'm probably either not going to like either my position on climate change will further worsen than what is in the status quo, or at the very least I'm probably like still going to be what it is right now, which means that the time clock or like the idea that I'm going to end by climate change is like faster in the curves paradigm, because in that I never see all of these factors as a major threat, which I do in like opposition's paradigm. And with that panel, I think we quite easily prove to you why we take this debate upon every single metric and why OG is completely out of this debate. With that, vote.
Great. I thank the speaker for their kind speech. I want to note two things on that speech, right? First, because like we were resetting the timer on DLO's speech, as a result of which, even if it was 7:09, they were actually within their they didn't go into protected time, right? It was probably analogous to 5:30. So taking a POI was fine. But yeah, in BP debates, we allow cross-house POIs, not same house POIs.
I was wondering that too.
Please be cognizant of that. Great. That said, to open up closing half of this debate, call upon closing government. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Beautiful. Just give me 10 seconds, I'll start. POI strictly in the chat. And Shaurya, not from the same bench, please. Yeah, so sorry about that. Just having a last sip of the coffee.
Speaker, whenever you're ready.
Starting in 3, 2, 1, go. Panel, 1 point of exchange rebuttal for we completely take this debate at CG. Note that different planets in the Great Filter Hypothesis will have different times of overlap if you look reasonably, which means that one planet will operate on a habitable time frame of 10,000 to
This meeting is being recorded.
Overlaps between these two societies largely, and that also means that you're going to have multiple like planets that live within different stages of living and dying. Note that just on this exchange rebuttal, opening half is out this debate. What are we going to do for you in my speech? First, constructive. Most life forms don't survive. Note panel that there are going to be two types of beings that exist within this comparative. Opening half only deals with one. First one, note that most life forms will not survive, but some will. In the first type of life form, mutations are likely to occur among those life forms that do survive, where the time filter is like 5,000 to 10,000 years, etc. Among these beings, the beings with sentience are likely to continue to mutate, especially in the post-destruction world, where the fallout of an asteroid means you have no type of cloud cover, which means you're exposed to radiation continuously. Among those who do survive, with little of your former population existing, you have heavy incentive to leave this planet. This means you're likely to focus on things like hypersonic space travel with the remaining electrical and like tech systems that remain post the fall of your civilization, and no government to necessarily stop you, essentially scavenging before you finally put an aircraft together and like you're trying to go somewhere in some way. We say this is likely to be something that you scrape together, which means as you go to another planet that may be nearby or maybe undergoing another stage that's there, where floods ravage, for example, mutations are likely to occur again, where only those who can survive things like deep pressure systems or can survive without oxygen and survive on methane gas are likely to exist. As these mutations grow with the harm that you face, we say as a species, you're likely to evolve mutations into 3 specific fields of mutations: mental, physical, and physiological. What does this look like? Mental. Number 1, your brain capacity has literally neurological pathways for things like empathy and care, because you'll need to evolve past that to survive. You need to do things like cull your own population to be able to survive. You need to do things like drop your kids or the weak or the elderly to be able to survive, which means you have these lack of catharsis or this basic emotion that we take for granted in other civilization societies. Number 2, physical. Literally, you're going to be a being that does not need to engage with ecosystems to survive in order to be able to exist. This means you do things like breathe underwater. You're likely to develop a thick exoskeleton that allows you not to be affected by things like noxious fumes. This means that your currency as a being or as a species is likely to be based on how much energy you can extract for external tech resources and machines, such as things like laser guns, such as things like hypersonic travel, such as things like nuclear bombs and energy devices that exist, which means to say that you create a better basis in terms of stockpiling this for like negative aggravations rather than actually using for conducive benefit. Number 3, physiological. You're likely to evolve to do things like not have children because the fact that it strategically disadvantaged your literal evolution as a species, which means you have no continuance, you have no desire or knowledge of what it means to continue their basic blood lineage or line, which means the basic example of where we get empathy in beings that are confrontational, such as tigers in the wild, where if you take care of a tiger cub, the tiger naturally is nicer to you or more friendly because it sees the empathy and care that's there, even if it can't express it, is an avenue that's simply not available. The second life form that's there, or top half is restricted to, are those beings who exist in the time filters that are long enough for you to live, i.e., and they use resources and die, i.e., like 10,000 to 1 million years. Here, we think that interfighting of the top half is largely a wash because the species may fight, especially at the end of this timeline, but they're likely to live and die before that timeline. Even the nature of nuclear war that we talk about is likely to be done cautionarily because all beings stand to suffer, and the scale of time means you don't have incentive to uproot and leave, and you don't also have incentive to do things like develop the mutations in a short span of time that happens for you to be able to survive these or for one species to have a complete dominance in terms of ravaging that's likely to occur. Next, on the purpose of civilization. The problem is that the second type of being largely has a purpose for civilization because the timeline allows you to invest in the power structures, governments, etc., which means you have filters to do things like you have incentive to do things like have offspring, you have incentive to care for that offspring, you have even incentive to want to be the dominant species, which means you have something you're investing in, the rich have something that they literally are holding on to. But the first beings have lost this. As you planet hop, you are likely to focus on resource extraction as well as increased militarization. This looks like geoengineering to extract all water from the crust, even at the crust breaking apart of the planet, because you have no basis of attachment to the concept of civilization. You likely do things like culling, which means the impact on your population is inherently less, which means the ability to extract huge amounts of resources of energy for extreme gain is so incentivized, especially with your brain chemistry. This means you have likely increased things in hyperdrive ships, increased things in laser guns that exist. The purpose then becomes resource extraction primarily because you were never given the time for attachment markers about where this resources should be used or any type of care channels where you see some objective benefit for the resource or you hang your foot at the end of the day and say, I'm chilling, or I finally find what I want to do. What does this mean and what happens then? We think these beings become the bane of the universe and have the capacity to do so because these beings now have increased capacity due to mutations. Weapons of normal beings are less effective because they have exoskeletons. They're able to survive things like nuclear radiation far better than you are. Number 2, their mental thought of destruction and single-minded incentive to develop manners to consume and destroy means that you have the destruction of planets where valuable benefit to science as a whole is lost, because note, that's what the debate should have been about. This means they attack planets where microbes, which could have been extracted to provide things like valuable benefit in terms of learning how to extend life or anti-aging or things like necessary things to increase the quality of life, are destroyed, which means the ability to recreate and backtrack on that science is inherently lost for society as a whole or even for future civilization, motivations that may be inherently altruistic. What's the comparative on our side, and why do we win this debate at CG? Because on our side, we have a truly interstellar world, which means attachments, when you have one planet and you're attached to rivers, the cultures, you literally grow up and you say, okay, I'm in this earth and I don't see more, means you have less incentive to do things like planet hop or develop the type of advanced transportation systems that these beings will. You also don't have the bloodlust and hatred that these beings have because you simply were not exposed and you simply did not survive that degree of pernicious harm that's there. Number two, you have one, like it's impossible if you're going to take the comparative of them having multiple worlds, it's likely to say there may be 2 or 3 Earths in the whole known universe that exists. We say at the time you have this type of cultural attachment integration that's there, you have the basis to engage on the inquiry of cultural association and integration, which means you are likely to see these individuals and likely to engage and interact. You are likely to also be fearful of things like, just necessarily destroying planets. You're likely to create outposts in which you can engage with these beings. You're likely to create more peaceful forms of existence and interaction that occur because of the time of the fact that you're able to exist within this world. We think it's highly speculative to simply say that one weak beings are going to survive and land up on one planet that's there. We largely think the existence of dominance in terms of one species that exists, we think that that can happen, that's a wash. We think the altruism that occurs in the idea of creating the developing world is something that stands on our side of the house. For all those reasons, very proud to take this debate.
Alright, this is Snehal. I'll be going member of OP. Am I clearly audible?
Yes, you are.
Alright, cool. POIs whenever, no preferences whatsoever. Cool. Starting speech on a self count of 3, 2, and 1. If whoever made this motion is watching this debate, I'm extremely sorry to you. Here's what it's actually supposed to be about. I don't think that at any point a hypothesis is to be proven true. People go ahead and act in absolutely different manners that they already do. I think all of these things are very debatey and far-fetched to claim, and I'll prove why. But then, I think clarity in terms of premise. When you go ahead and believe the rare earth hypothesis to be true, you believe that we're the only ones within the universe. As opposed to that, when you consider the filter theory to be true, you believe that you're not alone and you haven't been alone. And I'll tell you why both of these things are important. But I think at that point, then note, first, Karak, we don't think that there's a purpose to life, which means that you could go ahead and waste resources, you'll still die. Don't waste resources, you still die. Go ahead and produce children, you still die. Don't do that, you still die. I don't think there's any incentive or like good that happens out of doing any good or any bad at any point in time. We think that life's about surviving and feeling good about yourself, etc. while you're living. I don't think that these have contributions to the future or the past philosophically. I think at that point, then let's wipe off OO before I come to our extensions. I think OO's case is hinged on saying that, look, people will now realize that other people have been dead because of certain things within like the universe, which is why we'll suddenly realize the fact that, oh, we need to pull up and we need to invest in science that reverses climate change, thus better impacts because of pragmatics. I think I see 10 reels in a row that go ahead and tell me that you're supposed to go and help your mom. I feel guilty about it. I still don't wash my dishes. I think at all points, human beings on earth have this tendency to go ahead and rationalize blame, go ahead and shred off guilt, etc. Which means that I'm unsure, even if you're aware that other threats have affected other people, why is it necessary that that will translate into action? I don't think guilt at all point means that you now know that aliens were wiped off, which means that you now go ahead and invest in tech, etc. There's still proximate priorities. OO is completely out of this debate. I think in terms of OG then, right, I don't see how pain, clarity, utility, more land, less scarcity is even relevant, simply because I tell you that I don't think human actions are contingent on going ahead and believing hypotheses at all points in time. I'll give you more realistic claims. I think in terms of horizontal extensions then, note that the importance that you attach to your purpose within the universe and the universe's purpose for you shapes foundations of mythologies, societies, etc. What does that mean? This means that this belief that we're the only ones on earth, or a belief that you're probably not the only ones within the universe, goes ahead and shapes how you act within society, how religions are founded, etc. Which means that this belief that you're the only one within the universe is the premise of major Abrahamic religions, which teaches you that human beings are purposefully created by like God to occupy privileged positions in relation to like other creatures. Simply consider the example of humans and animals, right? We go ahead and think that it's justified to eat them, abuse them, etc. at all points, simply because we think that we're more important in terms of existence, simply because we're intelligent. I think the impact is simple. Now, when you believe the hypothesis in terms of the filter theory to be true, you realize that other people have existed at all points in time. When you realize that even if it's a bacteria under ice on some distinct planet somewhere within the universe, you now question the theories of origin, because you don't believe that human life is the only life that's present on earth for some purposes which are divine in nature within the universe, which means that you actively go ahead and question the theories of origin, for which like base your premise for traditions, religions, etc. And while we don't think that that leads to a lot of change within society, we do think that you go ahead and you question. And why is questioning important? We think that questioning as human beings is particularly important because it's important to not be too sure that whatever you're doing is right? Because we think at all points we rationalize and believe that we're the most important beings on earth, which is why what we're doing is correct, because nobody else really matters. At a point in which you realize that there's other like life existences within the universe and it's not just you're likely to question what you're doing. But moreover, you're likely to question religions that tell you that you're the most important person on earth, etc. I think religions are questioned, traditions are questioned, but questioning in general is then promoted. But what's another impact then? And Advit will weigh this out for you essentially. I think insofar as this framing stands that there's no purpose of life, I think CG is also out, because CG's claims rest on the lines of, listen, when you know this, you probably, like when you're on Gov, you probably go ahead and actively have more children. I don't understand how that's a net benefit. Why is having kids important? I don't think whether or not you have kids that changes your purpose in life, goes ahead and gives you anything at all points in time. You get attached to nuances and notions that do nothing for you. And I think at that point then it's important we consider the fact that when you go ahead and believe that the filter theory or like filter hypothesis is true, you go ahead and realize that there's other people that exist. Before I elaborate on that, POI quickly.
So in your world, there's a lot more life. CG thinks that when their planet is flooded, they don't die, they become Aquaman. We think even if their planet doesn't flood, their life is in constant pain and they're torturing animals. You're not dealing with any of the cases at all right now.
The reason why I'm not dealing with any of the cases is because of the POI that I asked you, which means that I don't realize why pain or other things at large are intensified or reduced, why people kill animals or they don't, simply because a hypothesis is true, which is why we tell you that our mech is the most relevant within this debate. Because I don't think that far-fetched actions take place or are translated into some sort of like actions through humans simply because they now believe that extraterrestrial life exists or it doesn't. I think at most what you realistically get, and this is something that we uniquely contribute to the debate, is the fact that you go ahead and question your origin, you go ahead and question your purpose within the universe, because the way in which you've been taught is that the universe is solely composed of you. I think that's the most realistic thing within this debate. I don't think any of the claims at OG, OO, or CG stand simply because they're not able to prove to you how like a hypothesis being true uniquely contributes to this. I think at that point then, right, note that you also go ahead and feel a certain sense of catharsis because you're the one that survived, which means that you're unsure why it is you that survived, but you now know that it's you that you're aware of surviving, which means that you're now appreciative of the fact that history exists, cultures exist, etc., which means at most you don't just get questioning on CO, but you also get appreciation of CO. Why is that particularly true? Because it's only when I read up about theories, about philosophical claims, etc., that I go ahead and talk about it and I go ahead and think about it. And it's only particularly true in terms of thinking, etc., because we don't think that this translates into major actions unless CG is able to prove so somehow. I think at that point then when you go ahead and think about other forms of life existing, there's also nerds and geeks who then geek out about it within public discourse, which then promotes all sorts of new nuances to come up. People think about this, people talk about this, people feel better about their existence on earth, some people feel worse about it, some people question tradition, some people feel nice about their religion. And I think all in all what you do get is a certain sense of catharsis, certain sense of discourse, but certain sense of meaning in life that exists exclusively on CO. With all that said, CO.
Hi, Samaara going Garvit. Before I start, first finals ever. Big shout out to everyone who's made this activity even remotely a safe space for me. Big shout out to Aradom. Thank you for everything. Okay. Cool. Starting speech in 3, 2, 1, start. Panel, let's take closing off out of this debate right off the bat. If the hypothesis is true, it won't matter as much, blah, blah, blah. If the hypothesis is true, you're simply learning about something that has been happening till now. Like, your job was to defend what this information means and what the impact of it is in terms of how it manifests. For example, the hypothesis of gravity was proven true. Gravity was already true. It was already affecting people till that point. Learn how to run a case. In terms of on the idea of like purpose does not matter or like there's no purpose, etc. It sounds fancy to say, but it's literally bullshit. Why? Because people create purpose out of nothing. People create purpose out of deities and literally formed a way of life out of it in terms of like be true, like practice peace, etc. You go and you make an entire way of life out of it. They don't engage with the fact that your purpose is taken away by watching the literal destruction of your planet, which means that you had no choice in the removal of this purpose. You become a species without a family, government, etc. That's all been wiped out in front of you. What does history even mean on op? There is no history. There is no meaningful connection to your history. All of those things I'll get to further on. But more importantly, why do we weigh over OG then? We think that OG is extremely narrow in what they argue, which means that they're doing all of this. They're running their entire case on the existence of like one Earth, which means they're running it on the basis of there being a particular area in a particular time. They ignore the fact that Aradom brings up for you, which is that different planets have different timelines, different habitable zones, etc., that will overlap in a Goldilocks zone to begin with. What does this mean? It means that this time is enough for some planets to develop civilizations, while other planets have smaller timelines of existence and go through evolutionary changes, etc., that we talked to you about in terms of like mutants and stuff like that. The latter is what develops these mutations. The latter is what becomes like the hunter to begin with. That's how there's a split between the predator and the prey that we tell you is so harmful, and we tell you that there's no scope for the prey in op world to begin with. Which means that opening as a whole is a wash, because these civilizations that they go on and run their cases on will take too much time to reach that point of threat with like things like nuclear deterrence and stuff like that. So all those inter conflicts that they talk about are something that are not prior in this debate as opposed to what we run, in the sense that we think that this threat is much more urgent on like CG, proven to be much more urgent on CG, with these mutations arising due to like short-term evolutionary changes and stuff like that. Taking out opening up too, because why not? OO says that since your existence is fleeting, you're likely to care more about like your planet and environment and stuff like that, with that smoker's analogy to begin with. But number one, note that they don't consider that that smoker fucking loves smoking. They profit and capitalize on smoking. They love fucking smoking, which means that it's not as simple as them simply stopping due to like an arisal of this knowledge to begin with. But number two, no, because beings embrace hopelessness then, which means that any living sentient entity only cares when they have some sort of ownership, some sort of like feeling of attachment towards their environments, and ascribe some sort of meaning to their environments to begin with. Otherwise, they simply don't give a shit about caring or conserving or protecting or any of those things that you talk about, which means that if you're going to get wiped out anyway, then why do you give a shit about like littering, etc., etc.? You might as well just live your life, have a gala time, and die anyway. You care more on our side because of ties to civilization, your capacity to form relationships, etc., that exist exclusively on Gov, because Aradom tells you about how it's likely that things like empathy, etc., go ahead and mitigate on ops bench to begin with, which means that it exists in a manner that isn't threatened by a species that does not have those ties to begin with. Go back to like the prey and the predator and why that's so harmful. Go back to Aradom's speech for all the mech that's required for that argument to stand. Then, what do you get exclusively on CG, and why is that the most important debate-winning argumentation in this entire room? Number one, as a result of surviving these catastrophic events, we think that these beings in and of themselves are created, and that are created become most capable of going ahead and spreading widespread destruction. But more importantly, we believe that it's an inherently unproductive existence that you now live, because you don't need shit like ecosystems and stuff like that. You simply need to extract energy and resources. It creates this dirt of any need to be good to begin with, which is extremely important and logically prior to whatever harms that OG pushes. Why so? We tell you that it's likelier that these species grow on to be like in nature, develop develop mutations, etc. Snehal, don't fucking unmute. In terms of like these mutations that go ahead and enhance abilities to unleash hell on other species and ecosystems and stuff like that. Number two, on the purpose of civilizations, we think that this uniquely exists when you can or need to attach your existence to a specific area or a specific period of time, which means that things like cultures, heritage, principles, ideologies, all of these things, or an inherent value of things like having a history, having some sort of stake on the like in the civilizations that you go ahead and live in, having some sort of desire to go ahead and conserve these things, we think that exists when a continuance is something that exists, when a value that is ascribed to these things inherently is something that exists for you as a species, which means that the things that live and breathe within your existence is something that exists exclusively on CG. Without this, you exist as literal parasites. These mutants go ahead and exist as literal parasites, and you only exist to consume and destroy. You run on no purpose. You just exist to extract energy and resources, and these beings become the bane of the universe to begin with. What's the counter then in the last few minutes of my speech? I think when you exist in continuance, you attach more value to the civilizations you have. Why is that important? We think that that's important because you have less incentive to go ahead and hop onto other planets as quickly. Go ahead and like have a like for things like a power trip, or for things like, you know, going ahead and furthering your civilizations, etc. Aradom tells you how these mutations are likelier to go ahead and like solidify themselves, go ahead and like exacerbate in terms of these beings becoming more and more powerful, in terms of these beings going ahead and restricting any and all scope of development that could have been accrued, that could have been achieved if there was more life on other planets and stuff like that, if there was more existence on other planets, more civilizations on other planets. Like, we think that for two reasons, you have less incentive to hop onto other planets as quick to begin with. We think that number one, on the basis of like self-preservation, because now you have more inherent value to your own civilization and stuff. But number two, or like you have less ability to wreak havoc as opposed to Ops World, where Aradom tells you that they're likely to develop these mutations, etc. Even in terms of engaging with other beings, we think that you're likely to be less hostile to begin with. Aradom already proves this. The impact of all of this then is that we have a true interstellar world on side gov. Why does it, which does not happen on the entirety of op bench. On opening, they literally limit themselves in terms of scope of the debate. On closing, they don't really engage with their side of the burden. For all of those reasons, never been prouder to propose vote CG.
Advit going closing whip, starting with no preferences, POI, just vocalize whatever. I'll ask, POIs I'll ask. Cool. Starting speech in 3, 2, 1. I have often heard debaters go too far with the debate world, but I never thought I would be discussing Goldilocks as the literal case on one side of the paradigm. OG, let me get OG out of the debate first. They say that once these societies exist, inter-alien exists. Why does that happen to begin with? Regardless of the theory, there have been other ways to discover them. Still hasn't happened. Why is the theory, in fact, even more important than E is equal to MC square for that matter? Like, literally, do you know theories of science, how far theoretical science has developed compared to practical science? But more importantly, even assuming it does, why are we inferior? Why do we lose? Why are we pained by it? If different time lapses exist, maybe we are in the time lapse where we're literally moving at the fastest rate compared to the other time lapses. But don't mind science. Astrophysical and geopolitical alignments change. You have no chance then either. For example, what if your astrophysical geo-alignment changes simply? You have no control over being wiped out. At least on our side, you do get to survive. But more importantly, I think OG is out of this debate by their own case. If intelligence compounds, the quest to live longer, be better, the more we survive, the better we are, the developed we are, is so much better, as opposed to, oh, you are so special. That makes you feel less special, because now you have no agency as humans, no historical proximity to life, what your forefathers did, what culture they emerged, what hardships and struggles they went through. I think that's important. It validates my pain, because if you base your case on pain, in your world, do I simply exist to feel pain? Bad tendencies at all points of time will still exist. You don't want to rationalize your animalistic tendencies, but you do rationalize the relevance of your culture, human culture, because there are others. Brings you so much more closer. There is now a common enemy. At all points of time, you feel more closer to the quote-unquote human culture altogether. We are all the same species then. Why do we not care about it as of now? Because we are the only ones at this particular level. Pakistani and Indians are friends in USA. Hindus cares less about caste when Muslims are there. Yada yada. I think there is so much more that you are able to feel towards your connected to humans as a whole when there are other people out there which are also sentient. But more importantly, then they tell me that pain, infinite societies, infinite exploitation, universe ends. You will do 500 Googleplex, this and that. People have to care about food and money, not space, right? That's your argument. Money will still be spent on things other than suffrage. Disparity is what causes it, not a lack of it altogether. But I don't think I can explain that to someone who thinks that if there are sentient beings, we can literally go ahead and exploit the entire ever expanding universe. With that, I think OG is out of this debate. Any PY, OG.
The sentient beings exploit other sentient beings on their planet, and also their life is pain. All you're saying is that we deny it, we lie to ourselves. You haven't addressed any of our mechanisms. You're not winning this debate.
You continue to lie to yourselves. Just because this hypothesis is true, your earth is rare, that is going to make you feel a multitudes of emotion to begin with. Your narcissism can simply exacerbate more the fact that now you feel, oh, I am the only one who lives on earth. Oh, I can do whatever I want to anyone else because I am the only one that exists. There is no one else out there, because there is like karma, any faith, any hope, any religion, none of that seems to matter anymore, because there is nothing above you. You are the rare existence that happens. Why is that not an impact on your side? Are you genuinely so blind as to see that these impacts can also accrue? Sorry, didn't mean to phrase it like that. But anyway, more importantly, different times of overlap. Now let's come into the CG case. Different times of overlap, multiple life forms at the same time. Most life forms will not survive mutation, incentive to leave planet. Just because we can send people to the moon doesn't mean that we keep doing it unnecessarily or all repetitively. There are new alignments. The universe is ever expanding. Multiple astrophysical alignments similar enough to Earth. Even if your rare existence theory is true, there are still rare chances for other Earths to develop out there. And do you not think that could make them even more powerful? Yada yada. Like, why are these impacts so big with regards to your mech? Because I don't think within 7 minutes you can literally prove how all of this will happen at all points of time. I think their impacts are going to be much smaller for a long time. And if they're not, that exist simultaneously, that exist inexclusively on both sides. On your side, what if my astrophysical geopolitical alignment changes tomorrow and I simply have no control over it because it is the alignment? Understand it simple enough. If you do not have control over your existence, you do not have control over your extinction by science, by philosophy, by any impact that you want to accrue out of it. But more importantly, then, every single argument, resource extraction, increased laser guns, all of these arguments at all points of time, they're assumptions, right? The assumptions on the fact that humans have no rationality or logic whatsoever. If that is the case, rare earth theory makes you more narcissist. Rich think they are specialer out of the rest. There is nothing but this earth. If I am the richest man on this planet, I am literally the most richest man on this fucking planet, a fucking universe. Why is that not a more harmful impact to accrue on your side of the paradigm compared to ours? Like, because these are impacts that will happen as per your theory only. If humans have no rationality or logic whatsoever, to simply go bombarding here and there, to stop caring about every single thing else, to stop caring about both suddenly and everything, then I think that also applies to these such factors. More importantly, lastly, I get history. You have a stake to preserve this history. For whom? For the people within this world. You think that is more likely to happen, or that is more likely to make you feel proximate to that culture as compared to where you can preserve it for others? I think literally people outside of Earth existing would make me feel that much more closer to my own history, that much more wanting to preserve it. Humans translate stuff from one language to another. We go through barriers in order to communicate with as many people as possible. I think these are impacts that are much better. At this point of the time, I don't think extinction, when we talk about it, is limited to asteroids. It's a metaphysical idea. All of these are to be taken into consideration. But I cater to simply 4 things, panel. General populace. I think 2012 matters to me. Theory of evolution matters to me. There are certain scientific theories that do matter to me, but not to the extent that I change my life course. But yeah, I would be more excited about them. I would want to maybe lead it into the way my life goes about. Secondly, the nerds and the geeks. I think these are the people that actually have interest. And I am better off in a world where there have more scope for dissecting, more scope for dissection, etc. But thirdly, academia and related fields. At all points of time, I think scientific discoveries that change the way you perceive the world. For instance, theory of evolution, physics affects concepts of philosophy and law as well, right? So I think these things are likely to evolve into a much better idea on our side for all of the grounds that I've provided to you. And other than that, I think if environment is also a clash in this debate, people won't care all that much nonetheless, but rather call out actors and government policies, because you now need to survive. It's not an inherent right. You don't survive because you're special. You survive because you worked for it. The people in the past worked for it. I think that's a better world, and that's a world I want to live in. Thank you. With that, proud to oppose.